It's day 5. I'm standing at the edge of my father's hospital bed, and finally it's me and him, just me and him. After 5 days of constant visitors and my stepmother laying in bed with him, feeding him homemade chicken soup like a combination of Martha Stewart and Florence fucking Nightingale, I finally have my time. I have to get the words out. You can let go now. I'm at the edge of his bed and I'm ready to say it, but in a flash, I decide to change my mind. And I say instead, because it seems like he's not ready to die yet, and it seems very rude to tell someone they can let go if they're not ready, I say, hey, Dad, Joe got a blowjob in a church. See, I flew home to Toledo because I got in the phone call from my brother that my father was probably gonna die. And the whole plane ride home, I'm thinking, I'm gonna say you can let go now. I practiced on a few friends and a couple of homeless people. I was gonna say you can let go now because, well, not only am I a good person, but I'm a good daughter, and I was gonna prove it. But the truth is, I felt this incredible pressure because 9 months before my dad died, I went home to Toledo, where I'm from, and I apparently disappointed my stepmom because when I got back to LA, I received a letter. And typically her cards were homemade with like glitter and hearts and daisies. But this one had a cold-looking schoolhouse with snow, and it was in the middle of the summer, it was August. So I knew there was a problem. And she said, your father was scared he was gonna die, and you weren't even there for him. And she said something else about disrespect, and she didn't even sign the letter with love. And it's true. On that particular visit 9 months before my father died, I was home, but I wasn't there for my father. I was staying at the house I grew up in, not at my dad's. I never stayed at my dad's. Well, actually, I stayed at my dad's once, and he was having sex with my stepmom, and I heard her ask him why he didn't come, to which he replied, "Don't worry about it!" I was home, but I was busy fighting with my dad's best friend's son, Joe, because Joe and I used to have a thing. And as I held that letter in my Silver Lake apartment telling me that I basically sucked as a daughter, I was thinking, you know, I'm not psychic. I mean, if he was dying, why didn't he tell me? And in a way, to me, my dad was like fearless and invincible. I mean, he moved detour signs on bridges and drove over them. He jumped walls at doctor parties. Now, granted, he didn't always clear the wall, and sometimes he left with a concussion, but you know, at a doctor party, that's the best place to do it. What other kind of dad did that? He threatened people with guns. He parked in the ambulance bay at the hospital. And he even hired a hitman to kill my mom. I mean, you know, granted, the hitman was an undercover cop, but he didn't even go to jail. You know, talk about invincible. But I learned my lesson. This time I was gonna do it right. I was gonna say, you can let go now, like a normal person. So day 1, I get to the Detroit airport, I drive straight to Toledo, go right in the ICU, and I see my dad, and he's behind a newspaper, and I say, Dad, and he doesn't hear me, and I say, Dad, again, and I can see that he's wearing a Gilligan's Island hat, and I'm not sure if that's because he's eccentric, or if it's because lupus, or his bald head gets cold. But I say, Dad, and I'm kind of staying against the door, and he pulls down the newspaper, and he looks so old, you know, different. And I start crying, like lip frowning crying, and he's looking at me, he's trying to console me, but he doesn't really know how, and I want to comfort him, but I don't know how. And that night, and you know, and it hurt. And honestly, I really don't like hurting. That's why I eat late at night and smoke weed almost every day, because hurting sucks. Yeah, that's good. So that night I made up 2 songs in my bedroom. I made up a really sweet one that I imagined singing his eulogy, and I was bawling, and then a minute later a like heavy metal song about his DNA being toxic came into my head. That one like this, I'll give you a line. Daddy, your DNA, Daddy, your DNA, Daddy, your DNA is making me sick. And it went on. Very creative. But whenever I went to visit my hospital to visit the dad, whenever I went to the hospital to visit my father, there were always friends around, the rabbi, my stepmother, and I would hum this heavy metal song in my head to like keep me protected. Because how was I gonna share my perspective or have some like, I don't know, I was gonna say clearance with him in front of other people? I mean, he was a different kind of guy, and I kind of turned out to be a different kind of person myself. Not to mention on day 2, you know, it might have been day 2 or day 3. My brother shares in the parking garage with me that he likes threesomes. I had asked him about this woman that he goes out with. As my dad's dying in the hospital, he's telling me about how he likes threesomes in the hospital parking garage. So the day I'm supposed to fly back to LA, I go into the hospital room, and it's just my dad. Nobody else is there. And I got my eye on the door to make sure no one else is going to come in, and I'm ready to say the words, "You can let go now." And right as I'm about to say it, I remembered one of the last times I had seen my father, he had mentioned that Gail, who used to go out with my dad's best friend, other best friend Mark, that Gail used to give the blessed blowjobs. Now, when I knew Gail as a kid, she, you know, come to think of it, she did have a big overbite. And then to think, really, that when my dad passed away, the woman that was married to my father ended up marrying Mark, and she had a big overbite too. But anyway, you look at, it wasn't a typical thing that my dad talked about who gave the best blowjobs. It was something he did one day just before he died, so I decided to keep up with him, that I wanted to like match him. He always said we were a lot alike, and I wanted to be like him too, so I decided to share the story that Joe shared with me about fooling around with a neighbor. He had a fling with a neighbor, so that's when I said, "Hey, Dad, Joe got a blowjob in a church." And my father looked at me, and like through the morphine haze, it was like each word was attached to an air balloon. So I said it again. "Dad, Joe got a blowjob in a church." Those were my last words to my father. His last words to me were, "Wear high heels, a skirt, and go to med school." I never got to sing at his funeral. And in fact, I didn't even get asked to do a eulogy. And what hurts more is that I didn't even have the confidence to ask. But 12 years later, when shame sometimes overtakes me, and I think I didn't get that moment with my dad like I wanted, I think to myself, you can let go now. You can let go now.